Welcome to the Duck Dive. This week, we're taking a deep dive into a collection of news articles you've sent us from the Southern California Observer Group newspapers. It's like a time capsule of what's making headlines in your world, from corporate controversies to the California political scene and even the passing of a music legend.
What's fascinating to me is how so many of these stories,
Mm-hmm.
while seemingly distinct, actually connect to larger themes of economic power, social justice, and the impact of political decisions on everyday life.
That's a great point. It's like all these events are threads in the same tapestry. Speaking of which, let's unravel this one about Target. Their stock took a massive hit. We're talking a $12.4 billion drop after they decided to scale back on some of their diversity, equity, and inclusion commitments, or DEI for short. That's like wiping out the entire GDP of some small countries.
This situation with Target really underscores the growing influence of organized consumer boycotts, particularly within the Black community. We're seeing a coordinated response from several organizations. The National Newspaper Publishers Association, the NNPA, a trade association of over 200 Black-owned newspapers, is running a selective buying campaign. Reverend Al Sharpton is calling for a 40-day boycott. And the NAACP has issued a consumer advisory warning about this corporate shift away from DEI.
Reverend Sharpton even pointed out that Black consumers spend an estimated $12 million a day at Target. It's clearly not just about the money, though. There's a sense of betrayal, a feeling that Target is turning its back on a community that has supported them.
Precisely. It raises a critical question. How far can corporations disregard social responsibility before facing significant financial consequences? This isn't just about optics anymore, it's about the bottom line. And it speaks to a growing awareness within the Black community of their collective economic power and their willingness to wield it.
And to make things even more complicated, Target is also facing legal challenges from both sides of the issue. Some shareholders are unhappy with DEI initiatives, while conservative groups are claiming reverse discrimination. They're really caught in the crosshairs.
It demonstrates the complexities of navigating DEI in a deeply polarized environment and the legal battles that can erupt from these efforts. It's a high-stakes game for everyone involved, and it'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the courts.
On a completely different note, the news of Angie Stone's passing hit me hard. I've been a fan since her days with The Sequence. What a loss for the music world.
It is a tremendous loss. Her legacy as a pioneer is undeniable. From her early days with The Sequence, one of hip-hop's first all-female groups, to her incredible solo career that blended elements of soul, funk, and R&B, she broke barriers and inspired so many artists.
It's amazing how her music touched so many people. Those early hip-hop hits with The Sequence were even sampled by Bruno Mars and Dr. Dre. And then you have her soulful R&B ballads like Brother and Wish I Didn't Miss You, which still resonate today. She had a sound that truly transcended genres.
The tributes pouring in from figures like Chuck D, Rocky Bucano, and DJ Ralph McDaniels really speak to her profound impact on both the music industry and the Black community. Her music often addressed social justice issues and gave voice to the struggles and triumphs of Black women.
Switching gears now to something a bit heavier, this article about Trump's tariffs and their potential impact on Black America is concerning. Increased prices on everyday essentials, like groceries and gas. That's going to hit everyone's wallet hard, but especially those who are already struggling.
It's a potent reminder of how economic policies can have a disproportionate impact on marginalized communities. The article mentions concerns about low-income families already grappling with inflation, and how these tariffs will only exacerbate those challenges. For example, economists predict that tariffs on imported steel and aluminum could lead to job losses in the auto industry, a sector where Black Americans are disproportionately represented.
I'm curious, looking at those potential job losses in the auto industry, how might these tariffs specifically impact Black workers who are already disproportionately represented in that sector? Could this reverse some of the economic progress we've seen in recent years?
That's a great question, and one that economists and policymakers are grappling with right now. The NAACP has issued warnings about deepening racial economic disparities as a result of these tariffs. They argue that these policies fail to consider the unique vulnerabilities of Black communities and could erode decades of progress in closing the racial wealth gap. It's a complex issue with far-reaching consequences, and unfortunately this pushback against DEI initiatives isn't limited to the corporate world. We're seeing a similar trend play out on a national level, particularly in education.
You're referring to the article about the Department of Education cracking down on schools that consider race in admissions and hiring. That sounds like a pretty significant shift.
It is. The Department of Education, under the current administration, is essentially attempting to dismantle DEI policies across the board, framing it as a return to merit-based decision-making. They're even threatening to withhold federal funding from schools that don't comply with these new directives.
So schools are being told they can't use race as a factor in admissions, hiring, scholarships, or even targeted DEI programs. What kind of impact could this have on diversity on college campuses, especially at elite institutions?
That's a crucial question. Critics of these changes argue that they'll disproportionately impact students of color, particularly Black and Latinx students, who already face systemic barriers to higher education. They fear that this will lead to a decline in diversity at universities across the country, further entrenching existing inequalities.
This crackdown on DEI in education seems to be happening in the wake of the Supreme Court decision on affirmative action, right? The one involving Harvard.
Exactly. The Students for Fair Admissions v. Harvard case, which ruled that race-conscious admissions policies are unconstitutional, really set the stage for this broader push against DEI initiatives. The Department of Education is using that decision as justification for its actions.
It feels like we're seeing a real backlash against the progress that's been made in terms of diversity and inclusion. It's like a pendulum swinging back in the other direction.
That's an interesting analogy,
Yeah.
and it's a development worth watching closely. The impact of these changes could be significant, not just for students and educators, but for the broader landscape of diversity and inclusion in American society. It raises important questions about how we define merit, fairness, and opportunity in a society that's still grappling with its history of racial inequality.
Amidst all this talk of political and corporate power plays, it's refreshing to see the California Legislative Black Caucus shining a spotlight on some unsung heroes in the community. It's nice to have something positive to focus on.
It is heartwarming to hear about those who are working tirelessly to make a difference, often without recognition or fanfare. It reminds us that there are countless individuals dedicated to improving their communities, fighting for social justice, and creating positive change.
What struck me about these honorees is that they come from such diverse backgrounds. Activists, veterans, healthcare professionals, artists, community leaders. They're all contributing to their communities in meaningful ways.
Exactly. And they're doing this work amidst a backdrop of systemic challenges and often with limited resources. It's a testament to the resilience, creativity, and commitment within the Black community, even in the face of persistent obstacles.
It feels like we're seeing two very different narratives playing out right now. On one hand, there's this pushback against diversity and inclusion, a retrenchment of power by those who benefit from the status quo. And on the other hand, there's this groundswell of activism and community engagement, a determination to create a more just and equitable society.
It's a fascinating tension, and one that reflects the broader societal struggles we're facing. It's about who has a voice, who has influence, and who gets to shape the future.
Speaking of shaping the future, California Republicans are pushing their own economic agenda, one that they say is focused on reducing costs for working families. Lower gas prices, tax cuts, and financial relief. It sounds pretty appealing on the surface.
It does. But it's essential to delve deeper and examine the potential consequences of these proposals, particularly who benefits and who might be left behind. For instance, suspending the gas tax might provide short-term relief at the pump, but it could also jeopardize funding for crucial infrastructure projects like road repairs and public transportation, which many working families rely on.
That's a good point. And their plan to eliminate state income tax on tips, while it might sound appealing to tipped workers, could also create budgetary shortfalls and impact funding for essential services.
Precisely. It's a classic example of the trade-offs inherent in economic policy decisions. There's often a domino effect, where one change can trigger a series of unintended consequences. It's crucial to carefully analyze those potential ripple effects before implementing sweeping policy changes.
Governor Newsom, on the other hand, is promoting his own economic blueprint, one focused on job creation, innovation, and regional development. And he's attached a hefty price tag to it, $245 million. That's a significant investment.
Newsom's plan is certainly ambitious. He's emphasizing collaboration and regional input, which is encouraging. It suggests a willingness to listen to diverse voices and tailor solutions to specific community needs, rather than taking a one-size-fits-all approach.
His plan includes funding for ready-to-go projects in key sectors like clean energy and biotechnology, support for Native American tribes, and a significant investment in apprenticeship and workforce training programs.
It's interesting that he's prioritizing workforce development, particularly in areas like finance, advanced manufacturing, and healthcare. This suggests a focus on preparing Californians for the jobs of the future and ensuring a skilled workforce to drive economic growth in a rapidly changing global economy.
It's a forward-thinking approach, but it remains to be seen how effective it will be in addressing the state's complex economic challenges, especially given the rising cost of living and persistent income inequality in California.
You bring up a crucial point. Any economic plan, no matter how well-intentioned, needs to address those systemic issues in order to be truly successful. And it'll be interesting to see how Newsom's plan tackles those challenges.
And let's not forget that Los Angeles is getting a slice of that funding pie, specifically for wildfire recovery efforts. $13 million is being allocated to help communities rebuild and recover from those devastating fires.
That's right. And it highlights the interconnectedness of these issues. Economic development can't happen in a vacuum. It needs to be part of a holistic approach that considers environmental sustainability, community resilience, and social equity.
It's a reminder that even amidst these larger economic and political debates, there are communities still grappling with the aftermath of natural disasters and in need of immediate assistance. It seems like California is constantly facing one crisis after another, from wildfires to economic downturns to political gridlock.
It's true. California often finds itself at the forefront of dealing with complex and interconnected challenges. It's a state that's constantly evolving, pushing boundaries, and grappling with its own contradictions. But it's also a state known for its resilience, its innovative spirit, and its willingness to tackle these issues head-on.
Speaking of tackling issues, that LAFD situation is still raising a lot of eyebrows. Those allegations against former Chief Crowley intentionally understaffing the department to secure more funding are pretty serious. It's a dangerous game to play, especially in a city as prone to wildfires as Los Angeles.
It is a troubling situation. The claim that she deliberately created a sense of urgency and crisis to justify budget increases raises serious questions about her leadership and her commitment to public safety.
And Captain Hawkins' account of those meetings where he warned Crowley and the deputy mayor about the potential consequences of her actions is pretty alarming. It sounds like there were serious concerns raised, but they were ignored.
Captain Hawkins' testimony adds another layer of complexity to the story. It suggests that there may have been a culture of complacency or even a disregard for warnings within the department. It also highlights the importance of whistleblowers and the need to protect those who speak up about potential wrongdoing, especially when public safety is at stake.
The whole situation is still unfolding. Crowley is appealing her dismissal, and the investigation is ongoing. It'll be interesting to see what the final outcome is and what lessons are learned from this experience.
This case has certainly brought to light some systemic issues within the LAFD, and it's sparked a much-needed conversation about accountability, transparency, and leadership in public safety agencies. It will be interesting to see what reforms are implemented as a result of this scandal.
Well, from corporate controversies to political maneuvering to economic uncertainties and those heartbreaking losses in the music world, it's been a whirlwind of a week. What stands out to you from all of this?
What strikes me is the interconnectedness of these seemingly disparate events. Whether it's consumers holding corporations accountable, communities grappling with the impact of political decisions, or individuals striving to make a difference in the face of adversity, it's clear that we're all part of a larger system. And the choices we make, both individually and collectively, have ripple effects that extend far beyond our immediate circles. Something for you to ponder. How do these local events reflect larger national and even global trends? What responsibilities do individuals, corporations, and governments have in addressing these issues? There's always more to explore.